Today, we're going to talk about the principles on which successful startups are formed and then apply those principles in forming your team from students in the class and outside members so that you can form your venture team for this course. Previously, I asked each member of the class to submit a venture idea containing not only a technical expert, possibly yourself, who can build the product, but also a possible customer for the product. And by now also, a good number of you should have talked to your customer candidate and gotten positive feedback on your venture idea. Those of you who are able to do that, let's call you guys the seeds, will then recruit members from the rest of the class. The rest of the class will then apply for a job to be a co-founder in the venture. Once you have the minimum number of people in the team, then you will ask me to audit the members and make sure that you have the right set of competencies as well as the complete set of skills needed to move your venture forward. Once I approve the composition of the team, sit down with your team and do a bit of planning for a brief pitch so that you can introduce your team and your venture to the rest of the class. One of the things that I don't want you to do when forming a team is to ask your friends to join your venture. It's better to be business partners and then become friends than to start out as friends and then try to become business partners. In the previous semesters, there were a number of teams that while they had a good product idea and an interesting market for that idea, they didn't do well on demo day because the team was not right for the venture. They didn't have the right set of skills and the right balance of skills to be able to execute the venture. The first key principle for team formation is from a book by Malcolm Gladwell called The Tipping Point. And in that book, he talks about the different kinds of people and the skills that they bring to start a movement or introduce a new idea or product into the market. And there are three kinds. The first is the connector, and as the name implies, is a kind of person who has a very broad network and is able to bring people together. The second is the maven. These are usually the geeks, the experts, the storehouses of information. And finally, there's a salesman. His or her job is to make you do something, to persuade you, and to close a deal. So with that, here's the minimum composition of the team that you'll need to start your venture. There should be at least 2 people in each team. No lone wolves, please. So it's possible that a single person might have more than one role. But each of these roles must be filled by a specific person. So there's a minimum of 3 roles. First is the connector, and the job of the connector is to address the market risk. Then there's the maven, who's expected to address the technical risks. And then there's the scrum master or the project manager who brings it all together. In some cases, especially if you have a consumer product, you may need a designer or an artist, and his or her job is to address the user experience and make sure that the user is engaged and is able to accomplish the tasks that he wants to accomplish with your product. So this could be somebody with a visual design background or an industrial design background. And it's possible to recruit the designer later during the design sprint and not necessarily today during team formation. It's the job of the connector to identify and document the customer problem, to probe the customer and document what we call the day in the life of the customer. We'll go through that in a future session. And then at the same time, to provide a hypothesis and to validate the return on investment of the customer. Once there is a design from your maven, then it's the job of the connector to validate the product features and all the other aspects of the design and the rest of the user story with your customers. It's the job of the maven, who we also call the know-how, to propose product specs based on the understanding of the problem of the customer. It's also to propose a development timeline and make sure that you can accomplish as much as you can in terms of prototyping during the semester of this course. It's also the job of the maven to understand and propose the operations and production requirements, and then to provide detailed costing as possible that will allow you then to propose a price for your product or service. It's also the job of the maven to understand any potential intellectual property issues for the product, and later on in a future session, possibly to disclose any potential intellectual property to the appropriate tech transfer office. It's the job of the Scrum Master or the project manager to review the training materials on Scrum and then to manage all the meetings, either face-to-face or virtual, of the team to prepare the backlog of work and tasks and to consolidate that into a single sprint plan. The job of the Scrum Master is also to manage the meetings and facilitate retrospectives. So anytime there is an assignment of the group and then the assignment is either successfully done or there may have been issues or not done at all, then it's the job of the Scrum Master to review how well the team did. And this is a key principle of Scrum, that you always end a duration of work with a retrospective. And the goal of the retrospective is to assess how well the team did or how badly the team did and figure out how to do better in the next round. It's also the job of the Scrum Master to track and document progress and to upload all the deliverables on the venture board. Finally, the Scrum Master also identifies obstacles that get in the way of the team to submit its deliverables and then to remove those obstacles. Now that you understand the different roles for your team, let's get started recruiting. So we're going to do a job fair in class. At the front of the classroom, you're going to have the recruiters, and these are the students who were able to do one-day validation. So for the seeds or the recruiters, please create a job sheet listing the available positions and then decide also which role you're going to take in your team. And even though you did your one-day validation, it's not required that you automatically take the connector role. Once you have your job sheet, review the self-profile board of the class and then actively recruit promising candidates. It's possible that you may have more than one applicant for a particular role. So please ask each applicant to show their track record in the role that they're applying for and then pick the best candidate. So do not settle for somebody just because they're your friend or you've maybe worked with them before. You have to match skill sets with a particular role. So don't take somebody's word for it that they are going to be good for that role. Please verify the profile board to make sure that they are a good match. Do check that there is no redundancy within your team. For example, it doesn't make sense to have 2 Scrum Masters. It's possible that you may have 2 connectors, but only in ventures that are double-sided, meaning you have more than one set of customers and your venture is the middleman. It's possible that you may also have more than one Maven, but you have to be specific. You have to define carefully the expertise that is needed of each Maven. For example, one Maven might be needed to do a process design, and another Maven might be needed for the actual product or equipment that is needed in that process. Finally, again, make sure that I review your final recommendations for your team members. So here's the recruiting checklist again for review. Connectors need to have completed the one-day validation. Mavens have to have completed a past project in the technology role that you need in your venture, or should have a contact who is an expert in that relevant technology. The Maven should also be knowledgeable in sourcing or costing the technology for your venture. The Scrum Master should have demonstrated past leadership roles. Finally, if needed, the designer or artist should have completed a similar design project as the one for your venture. So those teams that are able to form around venture ideas with one-day validation and have a complete set of people for the minimum roles that we want, either with students from the class or with members from outside the class, will be allowed to proceed with the subsequent deliverables. Venture ideas, even though they may have had one-day validation, but for which teams were not formed, will just be kept in reserve. Students who are unable to get jobs with ventures today, please stay at the back of the class and I will give you additional coaching to help you get a job or maybe help you work on your venture idea and maybe even get one-day validation on it. The one-day validation is the final individual deliverable. All deliverables from this point on will be by group. Make sure that, especially in the seat work, that you show up with your team, because if you're absent during that day, then you will not get the team grade for that deliverable. If you do not perform your role within the team, the rest of your team may also report you to me, and I may give you a deduction as a result as well. So if you're a recruiter, I'm going to ask you to pitch for 30 seconds the following items. Who is your customer? What is their problem? For yourself, how do you want to contribute to the venture? In other words, what is your role in the venture? And then, what are the roles that you need help on? For the job applicants in the class, please write down the following on a sheet of paper and submit it to the recruiter of the team that you're interested in. Write your name, the role that you're applying for, and your evidence of capability in that role. And later on, I will check that that is consistent with the profile that you posted. You are encouraged to apply to more than one venture because the recruiters should pick initially the top 3 applicants for each role and then do a short interview with each applicant to make sure that you can get along with these people. Once you have enough people in your team, then you should ask me to audit your team members and their profiles. If I approve, pick a spot in the classroom, assemble your team, and then start working on your initial pitch. When you're ready, I'm going to ask each venture that I approved to give a 2-minute pitch of the following. Make sure you pick a nice, catchy venture name, ideally no more than 3 syllables. Describe the customer and their problem. Describe your initial concept of the minimum viable product, which may be in the form of a sketch, a block diagram, or a flowchart if it's a process. Describe the value proposition. In other words, what do you have to offer to the customer, and why would they be willing to pay for your product or service? Describe the results of your one-day validation. Then introduce your team and their roles in the venture.